Meet the meeting live, Mayor Johansson.
Okay, well, we'll get started. I see Councillor Sadhu is not online yet, but we're at 5 o'clock, so we'll get started here. I'll call this regular meeting of Council, Town of Oliver, December 14th, 2020. Call this meeting to order. Are there any late items to add to the agenda?
No, there are not.
Thank you. And I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Can I get a mover, please?
So moved.
So moved.
Moved and second. Call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. First item is adoption of prior minutes. Just a second. Adoption of November 23rd, 2020 regular open council meeting minutes. Can I get a mover to adopt those minutes as circulated?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Moving to committee reports, I'll ask for a verbal report from the chairperson of the committee of the whole meeting this evening, Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we began the evening by passing a motion regarding our rules of procedure, just when having to do with our virtual meetings that we've been sent back to and probably will be back at for a while. And basically just making official the way that we've been running them for the last little while. So we have temporarily implemented the voting electronic meetings procedure, meaning that when council is ready to vote, the presiding member must put the matter to a vote by stating those opposed to the motion say opposed, as opposed to asking for all in favor. So that's the way we've been doing it as of late, and we just made it official. We had a visit this evening from our newly elected MLA, Mr. Rolly Russell. Had a nice little chat. It's nice to see him again on Zoom. And I think we all look forward to some fairly semi-regular updates and meetings as time progresses in the new year. We also had a look at our council procedure bylaw, gave some suggestions and some feedback, and that will be coming to us at a future meeting. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Councillor Ventimiglia. Moving to water matters. First item on the list is the Water Regulation Amendment Bylaw 1351.08. Bylaws here for adoption, and I'll refer this to the Deputy Finance Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is just for adoption, so it's up to council now.
Okay.
I will move adoption of the Water Regulation Amendment Bylaw 1351.08.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Can I get a seconder?
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion, any questions? Hearing none, I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 2, water quality report for November 2020. I'll refer this to the Director of Operations, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship and council members. The water quality summary report for November 2020. The purpose of this report is to provide a summary of the water system operations by the town in the month of November 2020. So, as council members know, November is our time to drain our stations, empty the canal. The growing season's over. So we have many things listed in the reports that talk about, this is a good time to pull pumps and motors and refurbish pumps and motors. We've also done some pressure washing for our next section to concrete and fix just north just south of McIntyre Dam, actually, from the highway culverts to McIntyre Dam. So that's the next section. And so our guys are always quite busy. Our operators are quite busy the first couple of weeks of November doing all these things and getting ready for the new year. As far as the water quality, everything was good. Our rainfall and snow totals were about average compared to previous records. We're just above average in temperature for November. And if I scroll down, our water consumption to date is just below the 7-year average when it comes to our domestic groundwater consumption. We no longer have the irrigation water on the November report because it's no longer being used. And our November consumption is a little bit higher than the 7-year average that we have. And maybe that's due to a lot of people staying home, or all the snowbirds are home right now, I believe. So there's maybe a little more domestic water usage. And I think those were the highlights from the report, unless council has a question.
Any questions, council? Not seeing any. Can I get a motion to receive the water quality report for November 2020?
I'll move receipt.
Moved.
Seconded.
Second, thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Anything to report this evening, Water Councillor Michelle? I think you're on mute if you're trying to speak, Water Councillor Michelle. Okay, we will move on then to
I would say nothing to report.
nothing to report. Thank you. Delegations and petitions. We have Kyle Fawcett here from the Oliver Serious Search and Rescue, the Vice President, to give us an update on the new truck and trailer building at the Oliver Airport. Kyle.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council, for letting us join in on your Zoom meeting tonight. It's nice being involved in a Zoom meeting and not having to make sure I'm seconding or motioning anything like with our meetings going on. So we're just giving you guys an update right now on our new truck and trailer station. I'm sure if anybody who's been past the airport recently will see that we're pretty much done. This would be the time that we would like to invite you guys down, but with all the COVID precautions right now, we'll just have to do it with a quick slideshow presentation. So Diane, if we can just jump to the next slide here. Actually, we'll go right through this one as well. So it's an update. The building's complete. Our response time now should ideally be quicker. I do laugh at that right now, as in that snowfall late October, we were still loading snowmobiles at 1:30 in the morning. The idea of the building is to avoid that. Typically, we have the snowmobiles trailered up, ready to go. The plan would have been probably this week to do it. So vehicles are now staying out of the weather. We're able to store first aid supplies and all that in the vehicles instead of keeping them in the main building, as it's a little better temperature controlled in there now. We can keep it secure. Trailers are ready to go. We just have to drop them onto the hitch of the trucks if we need them. An additional unplanned benefit of this building was we're able to get back training in person and meeting in person a little earlier than we would have with our other building, as with the 4,800 square foot slab, we were able to socially distance quite well. And this also allowed us to host the regional training course in October, put on by the JIBC with teams from throughout our region. So Diane, we'll just jump to the next one there. This was our original plan. We pretty much stayed with the same idea, went with red for the building. It is 3-bay garage, man door on either side. We're fenced up to the corners, so that way we can just pull out onto the road and go right away from there. We'll just jump to the next slide there, Diane, please. So we came to council in early in the new year looking for an approval on an extension. Our original land lease was in the blue there, and we came to council asking to be extended to the red, which we thank you guys for approving. We're able to get the building in there now, and we'll just go, we jump to the next slide. So this is our building. This picture was taken about a week or so ago. The trucks now with the fence done on the front side, we'll actually spin them around so they'll be facing out to the road. We've got our snowmobiles in there. Our UTV is loaded already on a trailer. We've got 2 of our quads already loaded and 2 other quads waiting in case they were need to be deployed, and then we would remove the snowmobiles and send them out. And let's go to the next slide there. So it's another picture there of our vehicles and a lot of room. Now we can, if we have to swap tires over, we're out of the weather. Just everything's out of the weather for it. We'll go to the next slide here. We went with part of our capital grant application was the key on the energy efficiency. So we've gone with solar panels on the roof. We've got 32 panels on the roof, and they're definitely sufficient for what we need. We're now looking into possibly expanding the solar onto our other building and get rid of that cost for us. Then we'll go to the next slide. And we did radiant in-floor heat as part of this. So our members actually came out on a Saturday morning in April and helped our heat contractor lay all the piping out onto the floor for it. We've got it going. We're just waiting for one more, I believe the boiler, it's correct boiler to be sent, and then we're ready to go with that. And that'll be nice. It'll keep us from freezing in there. We won't have to wipe snow off the vehicles anymore. And I guess we'll just jump to the last slide there, just the benefits. So it's going to allow us to keep everything secured, stored, and loaded, ready to go. Substantially improved response times. We figure it's an hour quicker. You get some members not quite experienced showing up, and they may not want to be jumping on a snowmobile to load it onto a trailer, may not be comfortable loading a quad onto a trailer, but now they're already loaded, so they can get it, just get the trucks out there. It's going to help hopefully extend the life of our vehicles, which we're just wrapping up this building. So our next plan is we're going to replace that fancy 1990 Chevy Suburban that you saw in one of those pictures there with another similar vehicle, something that we can, when we're allowed to put more people in a vehicle, when we're allowed to go away for courses again, something that we can use instead of members' vehicles, and instead of taking a vehicle that may have a lot of response gear in it. So if there's any questions or anything, sure.
Thanks, Kyle. It looks like a very impressive building, and I'm really impressed with the energy efficiency modifications that you've added in there, upgrades, I should say. Any questions or comments for Kyle, Council? I'm not seeing any, Kyle. So again, thank you for coming, providing us the presentation, and I really look forward to coming and having a firsthand look at it sometime.
Yeah, as soon as COVID allows us to have some more people around, we'll put the invite out to you guys for that.
Thank you. That'd be much appreciated.
Thank you.
All righty. We'll move on to development permit variance permits. Development variance permit 6947 Lakeside Drive. I will pass it over to the Director of Development Services, whose report is it.
You're muted, Randy. There we go. Thank you, Worship. This application is Development Variance Permit 2020-17 for 6947 Lakeside Drive. The applicant is proposing to construct a detached garage with a carport. To facilitate the construction as proposed, a variance to zoning bylaw number 1380 is required. That is to section 6.9.4 to increase the land area that an accessory building, structure, and carriage home shall individually or collectively occupy from 90 meters squared to 125 meters squared. This is a map showing the property location. Tuckalnuit Lake is on the right side there in the photo. The official community plan designation is LR, low density residential. And the zoning designation is RS1. Photos of the subject property on the left is the west elevation looking from Lakeside Drive. And on the right is the west elevation also looking from Lakeside Drive. And you'll see this is where the garage is, and then the house is behind it, closer to the lake. This is a map showing on the left, or image rather on the left, shows the rear portion of the subject property along Tuckalnuit Lake. And then the picture on the right is looking from down below up towards the road, and this is the garage footprint here. This is another clear image looking from down below up towards the road. You'll see the house spans most of the width of the property here, and then the garage spans just over half of the width of the property above it. Site plan will give you a bit of a clear indication. As I mentioned, the garage is outlined in red, the proposed garage, with the house being in the back here. The main floor plan of the garage here, this is a double car garage unheated area with a workout, storage, and heated shop here. The outline in green is basically the max that the bylaw will allow, the 90 meters squared, with the proposed variance being for the additional carport area here, which is approximately 350 square feet. The main elevations here from the road, this is what you would see here with the double car garage and the extended area and the carport here. Just wanted to point out a bit of a neighborhood comparison with accessory buildings. So as you'll see, the photo on the left shows the blue star is where you're looking on the right. So this is 6961 Lakeside Drive. You'll see the house is here with the garage tucked in on the side of the property and approximately 7-meter width here. The next photo is 6953 Lakeside Drive. Same thing, approximately 7.5-meter width here with some trees and landscaping screening that area. The next photo is 6943 and 6941 Lakeside Drive. You'll see 6943 does not have an accessory building above it. 6941 does have a small 3.5-meter wide garage accessory building. And then the last one is 6937 Lakeside Drive. You'll see it's approximately 5.5 meters, but as you'll also see, there is a hedge that is screening that accessory building. Staff comments. The purpose of restricting the total land area that accessory buildings can occupy is to ensure that these structures remain accessory to the principal dwelling. In the proposed application, both the width, the size, and the location will make it appear dominant from the street. Although the location and width of an accessory building cannot be regulated by bylaw, the size can. In this case, the house will appear accessory to the garage, mainly hidden behind it. Although a 90-meter square garage could be constructed in the proposed location on the subject property, approval of the variance would be a further departure from the character of the neighborhood. The principal dwellings on the neighboring properties are clearly visible from Lakeside Road and are not obscured by accessory building or structures. Furthermore, the majority of the neighboring accessory buildings are screened by landscaping, which has a positive impact on the aesthetic of the street. Research from staff did not reveal any precedent for approval of the variance. In 2011, a variance was approved to increase the size of an accessory building on a property in the Rockcliffe neighborhood. In that case, the garage was located at the back of the property behind the principal dwelling. So with that, the options for council is that council may choose to support the recommendation, they may choose not to support the recommendation, or they may choose to refer it back to staff for additional information. The staff recommendation is that council deny development variance permit 2020-17. And given the negative recommendation from staff, we did have provide the opportunity for the applicant to speak. I I was looking through the list of participants though, and I did not see Mr. McCartney logged in unless someone else does see that, but I will unshare my screen at this time. I don't see him as an attendee either, so I have tried to reach out to him. I don't know if council would rather, or if the mayor would rather come back to this until Mr. McCartney has had a chance to speak, and I can call him in the meantime. That I'll leave that up to your worship. Thank you.
Well, let's have some comments from council and we'll see where this goes. Councillor Grice, you had your hand up.
You're on mute, Councillor Grace.
That's good. I get a second crack at it. Through to the Director of Development Services. So it's not very often we have a recommendation to deny the application. So I'm wondering, to get up to this point, if the applicant has made any sort of accommodations to work with the town to sort of work within what the requirements are, or if they've just decided to plow ahead and hope for the best.
Thank you, Councillor Grice. Staff have issued a building permit for the garage, the original building permit plans that did not have the attached carport. So my understanding is what happened is staff reached out to the applicant, let them know about the hesitancy of the application, and the applicant had decided to move ahead and they wanted to speak to council. But in the meantime, my understanding is they're ready to construct the garage. They have an approved permit. The variance is for that additional carport. So to answer your question at this time, no, there has been no other discussions about that.
Okay, if I could continue, just a couple other things. So I don't know if it'll fit on the lot, but looking at I think it was the first example of neighboring homes. It was number 6961 was the first one you showed us. It seemed like maybe similar in size, but it was flipped onto its side. So I don't know if there's a way to reconfigure it so that the width is what's facing the street, so that there's not so much frontage on it, or if there's a possibility of requiring that it be screened like the other example that you showed us. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to the Development Services Manager. Looking at this, it seems like the only part that's in controversy, if I can use that word, is the roof over the carport. So the original garage and storage units fit within the current bylaw, and they could just have a paved parking spot beside the garage, but not with a roof over top. Is that correct? And that would comply with the zoning?
Yes, that's correct.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. I guess I'll just add a bit of a comment here. I did go out today and had a bit of a drive-by, and other than the one lot that's right next to it to the south, it is a very, it's kind of in the shape and form and character of all the houses that are being built in that area. Because the carport is really what's being included and putting it over the size requirement, I really honestly don't really have that much of an issue with it. It looks to me like it sort of fits in with the character of what's being built there. Yes, maybe a little larger just because of the carport though, but doesn't stand out except for the house right beside it, which I imagine someday may see a new development. Or I did have one question though. That building that used to be on that property, did it get demolished in the event of a new house and a new carport and garage being built there, Director?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, there was an older building a little bit further closer to the lake that was demolished a few years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, again, my comments were I would actually support the variance. I don't see this as too far a stretch out of the form and character that's taking place along the lake at this point in time. Those would be my comments. Councillor Grice.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to go back to my last two questions. We sort of skipped over the answer part of that. If we could put those back through to the director, please. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Grice. You asked about the opportunity to turn it sideways. I mean, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. If they turned it sideways though, then they would have to submit new plans and come back to council for an approval of the variance if it was over the size. So that may be a better question to ask the applicant if I'm online here, about how open they are to changing their plans.
And then for screening, I mean, I wonder if that would be enough just to solve the issue as far as the visual from the street goes, because I think it would be quite similar to the one example that you showed us.
Yeah, screening is definitely possible, but in the proposal, I don't know if, I'll try to bring back up my screen here. Let me see. I'm just going to share my screen again. So screening would definitely be possible. Because of the width of the proposed driveway, it wouldn't be as effective in the other cases. There would be minimal screening here, which would screen the carport a little bit, which is what they're essentially applying for. So yeah, it's possible.
Thank you.
Does that answer your questions, Councillor Grice?
Yes, thank you, Worship.
Okay, Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. I also did a site visit today, and I thought there'd be more information in the report as to the reasons why. And I'm still not exactly sure. When you yourself talked about form and character or fitting into the neighborhood, I did a little informal survey from Rotary Beach to the end of that street. There are 28 houses. 21 of them have garages on the top side, which would be what we consider to be the front of the property. I mean, the people that live there consider the lake to be the front, and that's why they build the way that they do, and I can understand that. So 75% of the houses have garages on the top side. Of those, the detached garages, there are a total of 8 in a similar situation as this. I did a rough estimate. I didn't go on property and measure, but one of them has 100% coverage. You can't see the house. One of them is 60%. 4 of them are 50%, one at 40%, and one at 10%. Furthermore, there's another 12 that are attached to the houses that face the street. Of those, 2 of them block 90% of the view of the house, and 11 of them block 50% of the view of the house. So if we're concerned about the view, which seemed to be one of the things that I heard the director talk about, we wouldn't be able to see the house in behind. When we're talking about adding a carport, when I saw his very first picture, I can see right through the carport. So the house would be visible in behind. Okay. So if the original plan was built without the carport, it would block about 50%. With the carport being able to see through it, it continues to block only 50% of the house. So I'm not sure what that concern is. And I went through how does it fit into the neighborhood with all the percentages and coverage and views. It absolutely fits into the neighborhood. It may seem like an oversized building, but when you look on the map that the director showed us, it's a larger lot than every other lot on the block. So the oversized buildings on a larger lot is not out of character. There are new houses down the street that will dwarf this house, if you're talking size-wise and how it looks from the street, and yet because it meets all of the criteria, we have no opportunity to say anything. So I'll support this variance. When I look at the pictures as well that the director has given us of 6953 and 6961, the street pictures, you can't see those houses either. They're blocked with garages and vehicles. So I'm not sure what the difference is and why it is so critical that we be able to see into someone's house from the street. The height of the building is such that the person above will maintain their view. I don't see this out of character or anything else, and I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Councillor Ventimiglia?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I came in after reading the report on my own, fully anticipating that I was supporting the recommendation because I understand the concept of keeping the size accessory buildings accessory to the. We're talking about garages and carriage houses and all of that sort of thing. But I appreciate the explanation given that the garage meets the requirements and it's just the addition of the carport that is what's being requested, because I agree that if we're talking about view through from the street down to the house, it seems as though that's not going to be obstructing the view in any sort of meaningful way, and knowing that the owner could just and park a bunch of cars there anyway, this seems like a more aesthetically pleasing way to do it. So because of the fact that the addition being requested is really just a covered carport that doesn't seem to obstruct a whole bunch of the view on the way down, I now support the variance as opposed to what I thought coming in. So thank you for the conversation and thank you for the explanation.
Thanks you, Councillor Ventimiglia. Councillor Schwarzenberger, is that your hand up from before or a new comment?
No, a new comment. Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm having trouble with this. I don't have a problem with the site view from the road. I don't really care. And if, as Councillor Grice said, you spun it 90 degrees lengthwise, which I don't believe they are prepared to do because it looks like they've already dug and got footings down, that would lessen the blocking of the view. I'm more concerned with the precedent of allowing a bigger structure than the zoning allows. I mean, we could go forward and see people, asking for more variances for carriage homes or bigger garages and using this as a precedent. So that's why I'm leaning towards opposing this variance. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Grice.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am in favor of the variance. I think I was looking for ways to make it work should the rest of my colleagues be in opposition to it. I think, I don't want to stand in the way of any development in our town. And I think, it's a nice looking building from the drafts, and I'd be happy to see it through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grice. If there's no more comments, does somebody want to put a motion forward to approve the development variance permit? From the discussion I've heard, it seems there's some approval. Most of council is approving it.
I will make the motion that council approve development variance permit 2020-17.
I will second.
Moved and second. Any further discussion, comment, council? Hearing none, I will ask the question, is anyone opposed to the motion?
I'm opposed.
Councillor Schwarzenberger is opposed. Motion is carried. Moving to bylaws, sewer user rate amendment bylaw 1331.08. The bylaw is here for adoption. I'll refer to the Deputy Finance Officer if he has any comments.
Thank you, Your Worship. No comments at this time.
Thank you. Can I get a mover of the motion that the sewer user rate amendment bylaw 1331.08 be adopted?
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Seconded. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item J2, Fire Control Amendment Bylaw 1369.01. It's here for adoption. I will, as anyone would like to make the motion that the Fire Control Amendment Bylaw 1369.01 be adopted?
So moved.
So moved.
And seconded.
And second. Any comments, questions, council? Seeing none, I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 3, development cost charge bylaw 1390. I will refer this to the Director of Development Services, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Worship. The purpose of this report is to introduce Development Cost Charge Bylaw 1390, which will repeal the existing Development Cost Charge Bylaw 1172. This bylaw has been presented multiple times, so I will just add the part that based on feedback received during the stakeholder engagement, it's been determined that the current park space is generally suitable for the existing population and that additional park space will be required to service future development. The OCP identifies a future 3.7 acre park at the northwest corner of Tuckalnuit Lake. As a result, it's been determined that acquisition and initial development of the park will be 100% attributable to development. Additional park improvements have been treated as a separate project, as additional improvements to this park site will benefit the existing and future population equally. With that, the staff recommendation is that council give first, second, and third reading to DCC bylaw 1390, and that prior to adoption, DCC bylaw 1390 be referred to the Inspector of Municipalities for approval. And I will pass things over to Alyssa Schultz, who's here from True, to touch on the most recent changes based on council feedback at the previous meeting. Thank you. Alyssa, able to share your screen?
Yeah, thank you very much, Andy. See if I can share it here. Okay, you should be able to see my screen now. Thank you for having me again tonight. This is following up on the presentation I gave alongside Randy 3 weeks ago on November 24th regarding the DCC bylaws, particularly the Parks DCCs. So the feedback that we received from council at that presentation was that there was general support for the proposed Tuckalnuit Northwest Waterfront Park, but that it should be just justified through its presence in the OCP. The feedback was also that parks that were operated by Parks and Rec would not be eligible to be paid through DCC. So there were a number of parks identified where the projects had to be removed from the proposed bylaw. Council wanted us to look into other town-owned infrastructure that could potentially be included in the DCC bylaw. And in addition, there was some desire to have lower DCCs than what were presented. So True worked with town staff to reassess the town's infrastructure. We looked through the OCP and we weren't able to identify any additional park sites or linear parks that could be attributed to DCCs in the 10-year timeframe. As Randy stated, that park on the northwest end of the lake is really the main park site that's identified in the OCP. And then there are no other town-owned or operated parks identified by staff that could be put into the bylaw. Aside from Bridge Park, but significant improvements were just completed at Bridge Park. So really what came out of this is that there were no other projects identified by staff or by True that could be put into the bylaw at this time. So basically we took out those projects P3 through P6, which was Lions Park, Rotary Park, Community Park, and one other splash park. So we took out those projects and basically looked at, okay, what would the resulting DCCs be? So that's what's shown here. You can see the parks column and the total. And for comparison, I've put in the increase from 2007. So you can see that on single family one, for example, there's only a $500 increase from 2007. I mean, it varies between the different land use categories, but really it's quite a small increase from 2007, the overall DCCs. Ideally, we'd like to be a little bit more in line with inflation, but you also have to compare with other municipalities, and there's a lot of other factors there. But essentially, we identifying that there were no other projects to add, took a step back to look at P1 and P2 as we had presented them. Those other parks projects that we removed, they gave the town an opportunity to provide additional park space in the short term, i.e. before the Tukwilnuit Park could be fully developed. So those projects gave the town an opportunity to develop park space in the short term to service development in the shorter term. In review, now that we'd removed those projects, we identified that there's some need for initial development of that park site in the short term to service development. So that was the justification that we used to look at P1 and P2, which were the Tukwilnuit Park, and adjust the scope. So what we adjusted the scope to, project 1 was previously just acquisition of the park site. And we determined that that was 100% attributable to growth because existing park space is generally adequate. So what we've done here is included an allowance for some initial park development, which would basically be, you know, some clearing and landscaping, creating some areas for parking, gravel pathways. There's just an allowance for some initial park development so that that park can be usable in the shorter term to service development in the next few years. And that would be 100% attributed to growth. And then P2, basically, because some funds would be put into the park in the initial development, the overall budget for park improvements was then lowered. Just to recap, the scope of that was public washrooms, an asphalt parking lot, asphalt pathways, landscaping, park furniture, and that was 10.4% recoverable to DCCs because it would benefit the existing population and the future population equally. So those were the adjustments that were made to P1 and P2, given that, you know, those other projects that could service development in the shorter term were removed from the scope of the DCC bylaw. So the resulting calculation with, you know, land acquisition and initial park development at 100% recoverable, and then the overall park improvements were 10.4% recoverable. That would make those DCCs $1,172 per capita. And the resulting total DCCs can be seen here. So they're a little bit higher than obviously if we had just removed P3 through P6 and just had the Tukwilnuit projects as we had previously presented them. This generally is a little bit more in line with neighboring municipalities or comparable municipalities, but is still very reasonable based on the feedback that we got through stakeholder engagement. And we can compare that to, here I've compared it to the draft that we came to you with on November 23rd. So you can see how much it's gone down since we removed those projects that are not eligible for DCCs, and since we adjusted the scope of the Tukwilnuit waterfront park. And again, just for comparison, I've shown that single family one, so that's just a typical single family dwelling compared to other municipalities in the Okanagan or in the southern interior. So you can see it's well below the median with this sample here. It's kind of comparable to Osoyoos, Keremeos, Summerland. Obviously, there's a lot of different factors at play there, but it hopefully gives you an idea of where this sits compared to some other municipalities. So thank you for your time. I tried to keep it brief today. I apologize if I went through quickly, but I'll welcome any questions.
No worries. Thank you, Alyssa. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was in town hall this afternoon and spoke with the Director of Development Services and the CAO and had a couple of questions, didn't get an answer, so I'll have to ask Alyssa directly. When you talk about our rate compared to other towns, I just wanted to clarify that that's not a realistic comparison, because our projects are not the same as their projects. It's just all strictly project based. It's only things that we have on our list of things to do that determine what our costs are. So comparing to another municipality is useless because they have different projects. Similarly, when you say that we aren't keeping up with inflation, we keep up with inflation when we do estimates, which your organization does, estimates on the costs of these projects that we have in our DCCs. So inflation, again, is not a factor in why we should raise DCCs. And my concern when I went into the town hall today was that I noticed that we have shifted some of the costs for the development of the park into DCCs. And I was puzzled why we did that. Why would we say that only people that are building new houses are responsible for a portion of the development when the development benefits everybody equally? Whether you arrived here last week or whether you've been here 30 years ago, when we develop a new park, everyone should be paying equally for that. And I'm wondering, and I'm questioning why we have put extra burden on our DCCs.
I believe I partially addressed your question there.
Question, I missed part of that. You addressed it where?
In saying that when we presented to you with, in November, we presented with 6 parks projects. As I said, those improvements to existing park spaces, they provided an opportunity to increase the, say, capacity of those parks for new development.
No, I'm talking about the new park at the lake. The other ones are off the table. I understand.
Yes.
This is the new development at the lake that you have included development charge or improvements for it in the DCCs, instead of including that, instead of charging everybody, you're charging a small group to develop the park. Not acquire, but develop.
Yes, I mean, when we look through the best practices guideline for developing DCCs, does identify that acquisition and development or improvements to park are eligible, are recoverable through DCCs and can be attributed to development. And that's the feedback that we got through stakeholder engagement, was that, and council included in that, was that the existing park space is generally suitable for the existing population. So if that 3.7 acres of park space has been identified in the OCP as required in the next 10 years to suit development, through the best practices guideline, it is recoverable through DCCs.
Okay. In our last, okay, that answers that question. In our last DCC bylaw, and I didn't have clarity again when we asked this question this afternoon, the parks fund allowed us greater flexibility than water, sewer, roads. And I say that because we were collecting parks money and we used it to build some parks that were not on our DCC list. We used DCC money to build the parks up by the high school. Does this bylaw still allow that? That we can shift parks money wherever we require it?
The current technical appendix in the proposed bylaw does not, and that would be in line with the best practices guideline. I reflected back on the 2007 bylaw, the existing DCC bylaw, and it does, it identifies an additional area of park space for development. There was a budget and a number of hectares that could be developed to service that development. That was based on the fact that, you know, the OCP or the parks plan at the time identified a number of parks, but based on the development that they had projected, they would have needed more park than what they had projected. Whereas in current circumstances, there is a park site identified in the OCP, and that will be suitable for the development projections, population growth projected in the next 10 years. So it isn't necessary to identify any other park space. And it wouldn't be in line with the best practices guideline from the province to leave that kind of open-ended. And I think given that it's in the OCP, I think that site, based on our stakeholder engagement, feedback from town and from council, that site is a priority for the town.
I understand that. So we're losing that flexibility as a council as a result of this new bylaw. For myself, I'm not prepared to give that up yet. This is all premised on the basis of one particular piece of land. What if that owner does not wish to sell it to us? We've collected all of this money for parks and we can't use it there. What do we do with it now?
Amendments can be made to the bylaw annually. I think, parks site being identified in the OCP is strong justification to have that in the bylaw. If there were other things at play that, changed the circumstances, I'm sure that could be addressed through an amendment to the bylaw and working with the inspector of municipalities to adjust the DCC bylaw as needed.
Well, I'm just letting the rest of the council know my preference is to leave that in the bylaw now, so that council retains the flexibility, so we're not locked into a particular plan. We had that flexibility in our last bylaw and it served us very well. And I think we should maintain that flexibility in the next bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Any other comments? Councillor Ventimiglia?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I am personally, as I read it and as I understand today from the presentation, I'm, I think, happy with what we've come up with here after much back and forth. We end up with DCCs that are suitable for our community, that are reasonable to developers or to those that have been consulted, that are in line and comparable with neighboring municipalities, and in fact below the median in most cases and below most comparable municipalities. I think I brought up in a previous session this the fact that we have historically used DCCs for projects that were not identified in the DCC bylaw. And I think that we need to be careful about shifting money around in that way. If we identify a project that is important, which is exactly what we're doing here now, and there's a target, with an end goal that we're trying to achieve, I think that it's, in my opinion, serves us well to keep our eye on the goal. And if something comes up in the meantime that may or may not take precedent, the fact that we can go back and have a discussion about that and perhaps make an amendment to this bylaw, I think, in my opinion, gives us the flexibility that we need to make those changes. But as time goes on and as councils change and new council members are at the table, I think, and definitely in my experience, decisions are made sometimes without fully understanding the ramifications. So without understanding that you're pulling money from a DCC bylaw that may be designated for something else. And all it does then is takes longer for us to get to our goal. And I think that it's important for us to sort of have our eyes on the prize, if I can say that, but to have a vision and to see it through. So I'm comfortable with where we've landed. I'm comfortable with the fact that we have flexibility, knowing that we can come back and amend the bylaw when needed. But at that point, having a full conversation about what that actually means. And those are my comments for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ventimiglia. Councillor Grice?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I had some concerns that I had voiced at the last meeting about the flexibility in the bylaw as well. Although the answer that we were going to give this a yearly review sort of satisfied that for me. But I guess I have a question is this a scheduled review that we are going to, this is going to show up year after year on the agenda for us to review, or is that something that we have to direct staff to do? Because I think that's going to be important. And then a second question, just going back to something Alyssa was saying, in the 2007 bylaw, you were talking about that we had identified a size of a were you saying that the park was, the size was identified, but not a location? So it was just sort of loosely in there that there was a certain amount of hectares required?
Yes, that's effectively, it identified a number of park sites that, like specific sites, and then it identified that an additional, I can't remember the exact number, but say 4 hectares would be required to provide enough park space for the added development. And that a budget had been set for acquisition and development of that 4 acres, as an example, but that a site hadn't been identified.
Okay, thanks, Alyssa. So yeah, I guess I am comfortable with the bylaw as written, you know, as long as I have the assurance that we're going to be reviewing this at least yearly or as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. I'll just throw my comments in here. I would say I too am in favor of the bylaw that we've arrived at finally today. I think a lot of things have, the process has identified a lot of things that made a lot of sense, and they've been changed and removed from the bylaw. I do like that new park development is based on growth, and it is going to be carried through new DCC charges with people moving to the community. And I think that's as identified, that was a best practice, and I do agree with it. I do like that an amendment is required to change it. I think if you're serious enough to collect DCCs for a certain item, that it should be serious enough to be sort of locked in there, so to speak, at least until an amendment is done to remove it or change it. And again, that is also reflects a best practice. So I would say that I think it's been a good process, but I'm happy where we're at today. And those would be my comments. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to clarify with Alyssa that we are not short 4.3 hectares of park. That was based on a population which included the regional district around us. We don't provide parks for the regional district. For our population, we are currently over parked. And I just wanted to make that clarification. Other than that, I don't have any issues. I can live with it. I'm disappointed that council would give up the flexibility and have to deal with it after the fact. Maybe we could make an amendment that into the bylaw that have a clause in there that in fact it will be reviewed on an annual basis, so that it isn't left to council to bring it forward, that it automatically happens every year. And that will also allow us to account for inflation, because if the cost of these projects does go up, then we should be adjusting our DCCs on an annual basis. So it actually should be part of the bylaw that it gets reviewed annually.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Councillor Ventimiglia.
Sorry, I put my hand up because I was going to move the proposed motion, but there may be conversation after Councillor Mattis's last comments. If not, then I would move the motion as written.
Well, on that basis, I would like to direct staff to amend the bylaw to include an annual review.
Excuse me?
That's the ale. I can't.
Thank you, Your Worship. It can just be part of the resolution per se, not part of the bylaw to have it reviewed on a yearly basis.
And that, direct staff to bring.
And it is staff's desire to bring it forward each year due to the fact of inflation and making sure that the costs that we have identified, are current with.
Perfect. That works for me. If Councillor Ventimiglia wants to move the motion as it reads now, I'd be more than happy to second.
Sure.
We lost
Yeah.
Junk. Oh, there she is.
No, you didn't lose me. It takes me a minute to get up and hit the mute and the unmute and the mute and the unmute. I will be happy to move the new proposed motion that council give first, second, and third reading to the DCC bylaw 1390, and that council direct staff to bring the DCC bylaw forward on an annual basis for review, and that prior to adoption, development cost charge law bylaw 1390 be referred to the Inspector of Municipalities for approval.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion, comments, council? I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is passed. Moving to item 4, Coat of Arms bylaw number 811, 1995. I'll pass this over to the corporate officer. Bylaws for rescinding.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report before council this evening is to seek consideration to rescind Coat of Arms bylaw number 811, 1995. As part of the policy review, the promotional marketing materials policy was reviewed and the Coat of Arms bylaw was looked at concurrently. It was determined that many provisions contained within the Coat of Arms bylaw was within the policy. They are redundant or repetitive or not followed due to our new corporate branding. The use of the Coat of Arms is currently limited to impressing on legal documents and awards and the new bylaw enforcement officer's crest on the badge. Pins and materials are currently using the current branding, and our flag was redone by professionally, and it's hanging outside City Hall, Town Hall, and is hung in our council chambers, and it really should not be sold or distributed so that we can maintain control of that brand. So the options before council are to rescind the Coat of Arms bylaw 811-1995, or you may refer back to staff for additional information. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, corporate officer. Any comments, questions for the corporate officer? Or would someone like to move the motion?
I'll move that council rescind the Coat of Arms bylaw number 811-1995, adopted August 28th, 1995.
Second.
Moved and second. Any further questions, discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to business, item 1, final update on the BC Community Housing Fund, January 2021 intake. I'll pass this over to the Director of Development Services, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Worship. The purpose of this report is to provide a final update on the proposal to the Province of BC's Community Housing Fund January 2021 intake for mixed-use development on the town-owned lots on Main Street, comprised of 13 units of affordable housing, commercial space, and a new town hall and council chambers. A detailed capital budget has been attached to this report, along with 2 pro formas that show preliminary rental rates, operating costs, mortgage rates, capital grants, and operating subsidies. Both options assume a capital grant from BC Housing in the amount of $1.775 million. Option A of the pro forma includes a capital contribution from CMHC of $984,851 in the form of a forgivable loan. This also results in a lower operating monthly subsidy from BC Housing, approximately $320 per month. Option B does not include the forgivable loan from CMHC, which results in a higher operating subsidy, approximately $595 per unit per month. The additional CMHC grant assists in making these projects affordable and viable for future residents. As mentioned in the past, City Spaces has been involved in other projects that have been successful in obtaining this additional top-up CMHC fund, such as $800,000 for a 10-unit project in Nakusp, $1.4 million for a 35-unit project in Fernie. In the majority of these types of projects, there are operational subsidies that are required. The lease agreement, which is also forms part of this recommendation, The consideration of this project by BC Housing is through a competitive RFP, which will be using a point scoring system to evaluate submissions. By making the housing portion of the 3 lots available for the project at no cost via a 60-year lease, more points will be scored, which increases the chance of being selected and funded. Making land available on this basis by municipalities is common practice, and this is the approach for the similar project in Rosslyn. The details of the lease agreement will be determined if and when the project is successful. With that, the staff recommendation is that council receive this update and that council agree to make the subject properties 6219, 6225, and 6231 Main Street available through a long-term 60-year lease at no cost in partnership with the Kiwanis Housing Society of Oliver for the construction of a mixed-use affordable housing town hall building, subject to details determined by BC Housing in the town of Oliver. And I will sort of just pass it over quickly to Gwen Simmons, who's our development consultant, who can touch on the significance of the lease agreement and just be able to provide a bit more information on that, as he is the expert in this matter. Gwen, are you able to share your screen and join in here?
Well, I can join in. I don't have the...
Oh yeah, I guess you don't need to share your screen. Yeah, sure, go ahead, Gwen.
Okay. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for asking me here this evening and for working on this project. It's a neat little project, and in fact, I'm hoping it'll get a support from BC Housing. It meets a lot of objectives. Maddie's just asked me to speak to the leasing. It's a common initiative by municipalities across BC. You get to continue to own the land over the long term. It comes back to you essentially in 60 years. And by doing it with no cost, you're making a contribution which is recognized in the capital budget, essentially as a cost. We actually put the value in and then we take it out as a contribution. The exact details on how we do the lease is going to be worked out. It isn't finalized yet with Rosslyn. There are varying complications associated with CMHCs in lending, but the leasing arrangement, but because this is a mixed use project, a leasing arrangement will be worked out. It will come to you for your approval, assuming we're able to get it approved by BC Housing at the time. Closing of the competition is January the 15th. I don't expect to hear back from them for probably at least a month or so by the time I do the evaluation, maybe longer.
Okay, great. Thanks. If we want to pass it back to Mayor Johansson, if council has any questions for myself and for Mr. Simmons. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Worship. Through the Director, just a little clarification here. All these numbers and the pro forma that you've given us, is this really between the Kiwanis Society and CMHC? It really doesn't involve the town at all? Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, not entirely, because the capital budget, there's a capital budget and there's an operating budget and pro forma. You're correct, the pro forma doesn't involve you really so much because that's the nature of the agreement, or it reflects the nature of the agreement really that's kind of exists with BC Housing. And it's a projection of subsidies coming in and the rest of it. The capital budget, however, does contain a split in the capital cost estimates between the society and yourselves as the town. It does show the town hall component in there, and you'll split the cost generally on a proportionate basis. So that is both at this point in time an estimate, it's best judgment of a whole series of items, as you can see, all the way from architects to legal to everything. And it's also a budget we'll be working with. So that particular item has both costs. The pro forma actually shows your costs in there too, but it's primarily related in terms of the cash flow relating to the operating costs for the expenditures and operating for the housing.
So just to clarify, the operating and cash flow is strictly between Kiwanis and that's their portion?
It will be, that's right. Correct.
The capital is, we are only responsible for our portion and take no responsibility for any of their portion?
Correct. That'll be the way it's drawn up essentially. There'll be, it's obviously going to be one contract to build the project because you can't split it into two, but they will be separate. The operating is just the housing.
And what exactly are we leasing here?
Well, you'll be leasing some portion, depending on how we describe it. And there are a number of different ways of doing it. That's the housing portion of the value of the site. We haven't had it appraised, but we've used the assessed value. The assessed value is $309,000. And in the budget, you'll see there's, I think from memory, is it 177, Randy? I don't have the portion up in front of me there. That's the portion associated with the housing. So you're effectively going to be leasing that portion of the site, that value. There's a number of ways of doing it. You can do it on a premises lease, which is what has been done in the past, which is quite complicated, or it can be done on an airspace parcel, or some combination. And that will be worked out at the time that it, after we've got it approved, assuming it gets approved by BC Housing to move forward.
Now, just to clarify then, if we had an airspace lease, then that would cover the housing portion. Whereas if we do a land lease or a shareable land lease, does that lock the town in? Does one give more flexibility versus the other?
I don't think one gives more flexibility. We're going to have to work with what works best with BC Housing's requirements and their lending requirements and CMHC's insurance requirements. Even if CMHC doesn't give a loan, they are actually going to be insuring the mortgage that's going to be taken out by the Kiwanis for the remainder of the debt after the equity has been put in. And it is quite complicated. We did have a conversation this morning about the Rossland site because there are some changes that BC Housing is having to make in the way it's going to be done. So I can't honestly tell you exactly how it's going to be done at this stage, but the principle would be a long-term lease. That's my understanding. If it's anything different, it will have to come to you for approval. And so, if there's something you don't like in it, you don't have to approve it.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm just trying to get my head around, like, in order to do this, our existing town hall building, we would be looking at selling that. Because this, again, is a shared facility with a 60-year lease, would that preclude us from, for example, saying in 30 years, the town has tripled in size, and we know that that's no longer a large enough facility? Would this preclude us from selling the facility?
That's a good question. I think that you're looking at the flexibility there.
Yeah, that's why I was asking which is more flexible.
No, it's a good question. We didn't contemplate you moving out quite so quickly, but
60 years is a long time.
It is a long time. You're quite correct. I think that you would retain ownership of that parcel of land there. I think that in the documentation, you'd probably want to make sure that provision was permitted. I don't see why it shouldn't happen, because essentially we're going to create sort of different legal entities there. Whether you'd want to sell your portion completely or lease, the former town hall, because there's also retail in there, and you've got to work out how you want to deal with that. Whether you want to continue to own it or whether you want to lease that. But when you get the lawyers working on it, I think you should probably want to protect that option. I can't tell you exactly how to do it right now, but I understand what you're saying.
Well, thanks. I'm just wanted to raise that concern.
Sure.
Thank you, Councillor Mellis. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. My question is the two commercial units that are on the main floor, which, to Councillor Mattis's point, I guess if we got big, we could kick the tenants out and take over those ground floor units. But would those be strictly available for us to lease out, or would there be some restriction if we wanted to stratify them and sell them, or how would that work in this situation?
Randy, do you want me to help here, or do you want to speak to it? Or should both of us speak to it?
No, you can go ahead there, Gwen.
Well, you do have some choices, actually, Council, I think. You could strata this project so that you could sell them. That's certainly an option. You could strata them, I think, on lease land. In other words, they could, because that actually municipalities can do that. Or you could just strata them, I think, and it could be part of a a three-way strata where there's the town hall, the retail and the residential are all part of one strata or separate on air parcels. Or you can own it and lease it, and it will give you the opportunity, let's say after 10 years or 20 years, if you wanted to expand, the town hall and just take out the frontage, you could do that as well. So that is something to work through before the, when we come to look at all this in detail.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Schwarzenberger?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Gwen. Thanks, Director. I don't see any other questions or comments from councillors. Would somebody be willing to move the motion that council received the BC Community Housing Fund January 2021 intake final update, and that council agree to make the subject properties 6219, 6225, and 6231 on Main Street available through a long-term 60-year lease at no cost in partnership with the Kiwanis Housing Society of Oliver for the construction of a mixed-use affordable housing town hall building, subject to details determined by BC Housing and the town of Oliver.
I'll move the motion.
Moved.
I'll second.
Seconded. Any further discussion, questions? I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 2 under business, food waste composite site and grant for food waste collection. I will refer to the corporate officer, actually the deputy financial officer, whose report's attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight, staff is seeking council's authorization and guidance in submitting a grant application through the Clean BC Organic Infrastructure and Collection Program. The grant is for 2/3 funding for the purchase of curbside collection carts, food waste kitchen catchers, and third-party educational programs for rollout of a residential food waste collection program. The application for this grant closes January 12th, 2021. The delivery of carts, kitchen catchers, and education program must be completed by March 31st, 2024. The town of Oliver currently has a cart program in place. As such, this grant would only apply towards the purchase of food waste, kitchen catchers, and a public education program. At the May 27th, 2019 meeting, council endorsed their support for the RDOS Oliver landfill grant application to the Organic Infrastructure Program for the development of a compost site at the Oliver landfill. This new grant gives the town an opportunity to implement a food waste collection program at a 2/3 discount. Implementation would also support the new RDOS food waste compost site currently being constructed at the Oliver landfill. The Oliver landfill food waste compost site is scheduled for completion by March 2022. And as such, this would be the earliest that the town could have a food waste collection program up and running. Initial cost estimates for the food waste collection project are roughly $15 per household. This is only a preliminary estimate and will be subject to change. Oliver currently has 2,200 curbside customers. At $15 per customer, the total project would cost an estimated $33,000. Oliver's 1/3 portion coming in at an estimated $11,000. Additional costs associated with staff time and the town's waste collection contractor would also need to be factored into these figures. Funding for the town's portion would come from the solid waste operating budget. The grant application requires a council resolution that states council's support of a food waste collection project and its commitment to the town's share of costs. This does not lock the town into a future financial obligation to proceed with the project. The town still has the option to forego the implementation of a food waste collection program. However, these are the necessary steps to secure funding through this provincial offering in anticipation of implementing such a program in the future. Options for council are: 1, that council endorse the town of Oliver's application for the food waste collection project through the Clean BC Organic Infrastructure and Collection Program, and that council supports the project and commits to its share of costs. Or 2, that council support an application for the RDOS to submit an application for the food waste collection project through the Clean BC Organic Infrastructure and Collection Program on behalf of the town of Oliver. direct staff to put in place the necessary partnership agreement with the RDOS, and that council supports the project and commits to its share of costs. Or 3, that council does not support an application to the Clean BC Organic Infrastructure and Collection Program. Staff's recommendation is option 1. Cameron Bond, the Solid Waste Management Coordinator for the RDOS, is here to provide council with a short presentation on the new grant opportunity and should be able to answer any additional questions council may have. Cameron, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I'll just ask to share screen.
The rest of us can't.
I can't hear him,
I've taken mute off. Can you hear me?
just barely.
Barely, yeah.
I'm not sure what else I can do. Can you hear me?
Move closer to the microphone.
That's a
Yeah,
bit better.
There is no microphone. It's my computer. So
Get close.
I'll have
Get
to-
close.
That's better.
Well, thank you for having me here today. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent.
So yeah, just to speak from the regional district perspective on the Clean BC Organics Infrastructure and Collection Program. So the total money the province is putting forward is $25.7 million. That's for 2/3 coverage. They have 2 streams for this grant. One is for new food waste compost sites, and that would be capital funding. The RDOS is applying for that for our Campbell Mountain site. And then there's new residential food waste collection programs, and that would be funding for collection carts, kitchen catchers, and contracted education programs. The Oliver landfill compost site, we have a new plan being developed for the entire landfill, and that would include a compost site suitable for receiving residential food waste. This has been designed for the town of Oliver residents, as well as Area C, Area A, town of Osoyoos, and the Osoyoos Indian Band. And to meet grant criteria, it must be complete by March 2022. The grant would support supplying standardized bins to all homes for food waste collection and education. It requires that the curbside service be implemented by March 2024, and the application is due January 12th, 2021, which means that there is quite a bit of things we have to get done by that date. As spoken already, we have the Oliver landfill site, which would be ready to receive residential food waste from the town of Oliver, town of Osoyoos, and the Osoyoos Indian Band. Summerland as well is implementing a similar residential food waste compost site, and we're in favor of collaboration on any grant and program rollout, and that we believe that would be the benefit of everyone, as we would have a larger economy of scale. We have recommended to Oliver, in discussion with staff, that they consider applying for the grant themselves. This would mean that any carts, if that's the decision of the council to support the purchase of, say, new carts, that would be the property of the town of Oliver until 2034 to meet the grant requirements. But we can consider the regional grant for education, or Oliver can apply for education portion, and we can work together on that. It's important for the grant that council be aware that there is a requirement for borrowing, if there is one. It seems like Marcus is saying that there might not be one required for your program as is envisioned. And again, the grant application is not a commitment to borrowing or financing at this time, but is a commitment of council to proceed with the project in good faith. The solid waste management plan process, if a borrowing is required, does not require further public assent from municipalities or from the RDOS. So in 2021, the RDOS has already envisioned consultation on the Oliver landfill compost site. So we would have to think about how we're going to roll that out. So it is something that's not covered by the grant. But we do have the RDOS solid waste management plan, a budget of over $100,000 that we're now moving through the budget process through the regional district. And that's been earmarked to be spent on public consultation for a new solid waste management plan. And we could consider doing some of the public consultation on this new rollout of the program through some of those funds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cameron. Councillor Mattis, you have a question, comment?
Yes, I do, Your Worship. I'm not sure who it's through. It's probably through to Marcus. In the solid waste operating budget, the $11,000 would have to come out of that. Would that require, do we currently drive a, what do you call it here? What I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? Do we have the funds without raising taxes is the question.
Surplus.
Surplus, that's the word I'm looking for.
Right.
Do we have an annual surplus in there to cover the 11,000?
No, yes, sorry, Councillor Mattis. At the moment, we do not have a surplus, but we do have substantial reserves that would take care of that. At the end of 2019, we had 380,000 in reserves, and it would likely just come out of reserves, and we wouldn't even require an increase to user fees.
Okay. That kind of is a follow-up question. Do we have any indication what our cost per house is ongoing? This is another one of those wonderful provincial government programs where they give you the money at the start and then you have to pay for it from then on. So they'll give us the money to get started here, but what's going to be our ongoing costs?
So that has not been determined yet. It likely wouldn't be substantial. We would have to talk to Waste Connections, who is our contractor for picking up curbside. And there'd be an increased cost there. All these details would be sorted out in the future, and that would all come to council at a future date for implementation of this program. At this time, all we're asking for is to apply for this grant in anticipation for such a program to roll out at a future date.
Are we, if we get the grant money, if it's approved, are we committed to it is my question.
The answer to that is no. I think Cameron can talk to this further. He knows more about the grant than I do, but the answer to that is no. We would apply for grant funding. It's based on claims, so you'd have to actually spend money, claim it to get the money back. Yeah. And if we didn't end up going through with the program and we ended up not spending money, we wouldn't be out anything.
Okay, so we'll have an opportunity to find out what our ongoing costs are before
Exactly.
we commit to anything. That's a critical piece. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Worship. I have a few questions, I think probably for Cameron. So I'm thinking about they have the composting program in the city of Calgary and they use their green bins. So I'm assuming since we're only getting the 1/3 funding, or that's what we're looking at, that it would be the same thing. We're going to be combining our yard waste with our compost. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, the Oliver landfill compost site is designed to receive yard waste with food waste. We would prefer it that way. It will help reduce odor, as well as be able to use existing infrastructure the town of Oliver has, which is your yard waste carts.
And then will it allow, I was, almost shocked with all the things you could throw in there. Like you could have your paper products and bones and all sorts of stuff. So are we looking at something similar, or is there sort of a different, grades of compost facilities?
Yeah, so certainly the Calgary compost site is amazing. It's one of the best built compost sites in Canada. They accept materials like diapers, dog waste, compostable plastics, which we could not accept at our facility. Our facility will be a very simple program, but bones, cooked foods, meats, other breads, things that would be very smelly and gross in a backyard compost bin, as long as the materials you can place in a compost bin currently, like your yard waste and your uncooked fruits and vegetables, those would be the materials we would look at collecting.
Okay, thanks, Cameron. And then my other question is, so we're looking at two different options, either applying on our own or applying in a partnership with the RDOS. So the RDOS letter to us says that it makes financial sense for us to work together. So I'm wondering if you can just sort of shed a bit of light on what the differences would be.
Yeah, well, in working together, I think no matter who applies for the grant, if the funds are available and the council and the board approve moving forward, by working together, we can purchase the kitchen catchers that was mentioned in Marcus's report. And those are small units to be provided to all households that are part of the education program. We would be doing advertising, we would be doing newsletters, and all of this would have to be done through a contractor to recover the 2/3 costing available through the grant. So by having the same contractor, the same brochures, even if we change the letterhead to meet the town of Oliver's goals, just all of that stuff, by working together, we can save costs. Otherwise, we have 4 contractors because we're also working with the town of Oliver and the Asillas Indian Band doing different work. So that's where we see that by working together, by meeting the objectives of both council and the board, we can save money.
So if we do choose that option to do this in partnership with the RDOS, do we lose that flexibility then of waiting to see what our ongoing costs are going to be and then perhaps pulling out?
Well, I don't know. That's not the intent of this presentation. It's supposed to show that by working together, it does give the RDOS more control. So I did discuss that concern with Town of Oliver staff, in that if it's your money, it's your money, 100%. We would be working on a partnership agreement if we applied for the grant on your behalf. So there would be a contract in place to protect the Town of Oliver. There would be no way for us to sort of go around that contract, as that would also be shared with the province of British Columbia. So I think there's a lot of protections there. But if it's easier for you guys to do your grants are very onerous to apply for, and they're somewhat onerous to do all the tracking for. We have volunteered to do that in part for the education component. We don't feel comfortable doing the capital component, but that's not a factor for the Town of Oliver, as you have existing carts. For the Town of Asillas, as an example, we've asked them to apply for their own grant for the capital portion, as they would own those carts until 2034. And the RDOS doesn't feel comfortable taking on that capital obligation to control carts used by the Town of Asillas until 2034. This for the Town of Oliver would be education. It's expendable. It's done once, and then there is no capital. So we would be able to work through that agreement. But it's really up to council what you would prefer, and staff of the Town of Oliver.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Any other comments, questions, council? Councillor Mattis.
Yeah, based on that, I prefer to keep the overhead and infrastructure in-house as opposed to farming it out to the regional district. That's my personal preference.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. I agree with Councillor Mattis. I think we should do this on our own as far as applying for the grant. We could always partner with the RDOS to do the education portion of it, get the same contractor who's going to do the same work in both the RDOS and for the Town of Oliver. I think that makes sense, but I agree with Councillor Mattis. I'd like to keep the funds, our funds for our project, so the Town of Oliver should do the application on its own. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. Any other comments? I don't see any. Would anybody like to put a motion forward?
I will make the motion that council endorse the Town of Oliver's application for the food waste collection project through the Clean BC Organic Infrastructure and Collection Program, and that council support the project and commit to its share of the costs. And further, that staff be directed to apply for the grant. I don't see that in there. Oh, I guess it is there. Sorry, the application for, yeah, you're right.
I'll second.
Moved and second. Any further comments, questions? I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 3, a regional aquatic feasibility study update. I will pass this over to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is in front of council to provide an update on the re-engagement of partners for the undertaking of the regional aquatic facility feasibility study and to receive direction for going forward. Further to the last update provided in October, confirmation has been received that the Asillas Indian Band will contribute funding of $5,600 and change towards the feasibility study. And Asillas has indicated they have budgeted $40,000 and we have $30,000 budgeted. Additional investigation has been undertaken around the cost of a feasibility study, and in 2020, the Columbia Shuswap Regional District and the town of Golden put out an RFP for a study, and the budget for that study was identified at $70,000. They did allow for an additional $15,000 for a total of $85,000. The funds that the town of Osoyoos, town of Oliver, and Osoyoos Indian Band had previously committed to undertake the study would be sufficient to proceed with a regional aquatic facility feasibility study that would provide the necessary information needed for the partners to make a decision for going forward. There's 4 options for council. Council can determine if they want to proceed with the feasibility study. You can determine that you do not want to proceed. You can determine to discuss it further during the 2021 budget, or you can refer it back for additional information to staff.
Thank you, CEO. Councillor Mattis.
Through the CAO, is it possible for us to put out an RFP asking people what it would cost us as opposed to giving them a budget? You know, like, can we send out an RFP saying, asking, we would like a feasibility study done for the aquatic center. What will you give us and what will it cost?
So you want not an RFP, but an RFQ.
Okay, sounds fine. Is that a good, is that a reasonable way for us to proceed? That just would nail down our costs more.
Yeah.
And also give Osoyoos and the OIB a better indication of what our costs would be. Is that something that would make sense in this situation?
It's a possibility to do it that way. You'd have to get, I could talk to Ellen and to the Osoyoos Indian Band with respect to going for an RFQ or an RFP.
Yeah, I mean, an RFQ isn't going to cost us very little beyond staff time.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Ventimiglia.
Well, I think it will come as no surprise that I just want to get this done. So whichever the best way to do that is, I think staff can probably advise us as to whether it's an RFP or an RFQ. But whatever the quickest way to move forward with the feasibility study without having to come back multiple times or go back to the partner multiple times. Everybody's, or the 3 of us have agreed that we want to continue. There's funds available. And so I'm, again, just in favor of the straightest way forward.
Councillors, thank you, Councillor Ventimiglia. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. I would favor the RFQ that we go forward. I'm still a little underwhelmed by the fact that the RDOS doesn't want to play, but I think we should get to the feasibility study anyway. So I think we should go ahead with an RFQ and at least see what a full feasibility study would cost, and then we can decide at that point whether we want to go forward or not. Obviously, we have $30,000 set aside now, so I'd like to see what we can get as far as a feasibility study for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. CAO, I'm just wondering what you mean by an RFQ. Are you talking about a request for qualification, or maybe you could request for quote? Okay, thank you. Councillor Mattis, you had your hand up, or was that?
I think actually all my questions have been fairly well answered. Nothing's going to happen over the holidays for certain. I would like to proceed with the RFQ as opposed to an RFP. If the numbers come in right, we may get participation from the Area A and Area C. If the numbers are low enough, they may step back up to the plate, which I'm kind of with Councillor Schwarzenberger on this. I am concerned that if they're not prepared to support a study, then what is their level of support for beyond that? So that, to me, and if we can get some commitment from them would be a nice thing. I think an RFQ is the way to go. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Councilor Meta. Should we put a motion forward that council determine or council want to proceed with a feasibility study through an RFQ?
The council directs staff to proceed with an RFQ for a feasibility study on an aquatic center.
I'd be doing that with our partners.
What kind of cost is involved in doing something like this?
It's just staff time.
So it's our staff time, basically.
Well, ours, and actually right now, the CAO for the town of Osoyoos has been looking at the RFQ, and he was starting to work on that, and we'd be working with the Osoyoos Indian Band as well. Mike Capel was the contact for that. So it would be the three working together, because it's being funded by all three.
Yeah, I think the motion covers however staff goes about to get it done, whether that's working with Osoyoos, OIB, or whatever. The motion covers it. So I would make the motion.
I'll second.
Motion is moved and second. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 4, corporate branding promotional materials policy. I will pass this over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report before you is the corporate branding promotional materials policy. We are seeking council's approval to adopt the amended policy, which is attached to the report. This is a part of council's policy review. And the comment from council in April was that consideration be given to updating the policy with the current practices of the municipality. As I mentioned earlier, with the coat of arms bylaw rescinding, council had adopted the guidelines. The quotations are brand in 2018, and the policy statements in the amended policy are consistent with the use of our brand, and that the images are to portray a high quality identity as a single organization. Any provision regarding the use of the brand inappropriately or unauthorized could be an indication that a breach has occurred, and appropriate measures could be considered. Further in my report, I speak to the coat of arms bylaw that I spoke to earlier, and those items that are still current and active have been incorporated into the new policy. I've attached the new policy for your consideration, and the existing policy, which I marked in red and green, that shows the changes and considerations for council's review. There are options before council this evening with respect to this new policy or amended a policy, that you may wish to adopt the amended corporate branding and promotional materials policy. You may refer back to staff for additional information, or you may resolve to use the existing policy as it is. And the resolution is that council adopt the amended corporate branding promotional materials policy attached to the corporate officer's December 14th, 2020 staff report, and I can take any questions.
I don't see anybody with their hand up with any questions. Would anybody like to move the motion?
I'll move that council adopt the amended, oh, no, you covered it up.
Right.
That's okay. The amended corporate branding promotional materials policy attached to the corporate officer's December 14, 2020 staff report.
I'll second.
Moved in second. Any discussion? I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to correspondence, December 14th correspondence report. I will refer to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The correspondence report before council has 2 items for information only, both from mayors. The first one is from the District of Saanich, that is encouraging royal assent of Bill C5 for recognition of September 30th as a statutory national holiday for truth and reconciliation. As well, one from the mayor of Fort St. John's. They are requesting UBCM to provide an update on the members' response to the resolution submission process and to consider change in the minister meeting scheduling. The motion before council is that the correspondence listed in L2 and the weekly mail correspondence be received.
So moved.
So moved. Second, please. Thank you. Any discussion? Call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to reports. Item 1, the building permit activity report for November 2020. Here for receipt.
I'll move receipt.
Moved. Anyone want a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 2, the fire department activity report for November 2020. Report for receipt. Anyone want to move that?
I'll move receipt.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to councillor reports. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I attended the public hearing through Zoom. I don't remember the date for the warming shelter. And I don't know if I'll have an opportunity afterwards, but I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and all the best of the season. And I can assure you that I will be thinking of you while I tilt a glass at some point during the holidays.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to assist Councillor Mattis there, that was December 3rd. So going back to Tuesday, November 26th, I attended the Oliver Age Friendly Working Group. We worked through the age friendly assessment responses, just trying to fill in some gaps that were there. Wednesday, December 2nd was a SILGA meeting. We had a discussion with the UBCM President Brian Frankel. Also had a presentation by Fortis about their Clean Growth Pathway 2050 and discussed future conventions. Thursday, December 3rd, along with other council colleagues, was the Oliver Coldweather Shelter Public Information Meeting. And Monday, December 7th, I attended the Oliver Centennial Planning Committee meeting and today's meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you, Your Worship. The only official business that I have on my calendar for the last couple of weeks, I think, is Primary Care Network clinic discussion meeting, which was hosted by the Division of Family Practice, and that was also on Thursday, December the 3rd.
Thank you, Councillor Ventimiglia. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. Tuesday, December 1st, I attended an Oliver Tourism meeting via Zoom. And Thursday, December 3rd, with the rest of council, I attended the public info session for the cold weather shelter via Zoom as well. And I would like to echo Councillor Mattis's comments for a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all the citizens of Oliver.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. On November 25th, I attended, or virtually anyway, the FCM third series, the third workshop in the climate leadership course. On December 3rd, I had RDOS all day, and in the evening with Councillor Ventimiglia, I also attended the PCN clinic discussion with Divisions of Family Practice, had RDOS on December 4th, and on December 10th, I had the South Okanagan Mayor's Roundtable. Another thing I'd like to just mention is our 75th anniversary this year, December 31st, 1945, the town of Oliver was incorporated as the Village of Oliver. Today, I would like to officially recognize our town in its 75th year celebration. Quietly, the town has been acknowledging our 75 years, and I encourage you to visit the town's website and browse through a bit of Oliver's history and stories along with the mayor's images since 1945. The page has been dedicated to identifying the town's milestones and histories, and we would still like to hear from you to share your stories and see images of our past. I'm very proud of the partnerships that have been formed regionally to provide and build on the many services and amenities that residents enjoy today. A community-to-community forum is planned for early 2021 that will continue to build on relationships with the Osoyoos Indian Band along with our neighboring local governments. As we say goodbye or good riddance to 2020, stay tuned for the 100th year anniversary of Greater Oliver in 2021. And the last thing I have to say is we have a CAO recognition. I would like to congratulate our Chief Administrative Officer, Kathy Cowan, who was recently recognized by the Local Government Management Association of British Columbia under the category for Professional Service Award Innovation. For outstanding service, the award is for outstanding service to the development of management programs and innovations resulting in increased effectiveness and contribution to the community and local government administration. Congratulations, Kathy. And I also would like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and health and prosperity in 2021. I will be thinking of everybody during the holidays, and I hope that we can get together sooner than later in 2021. Upcoming meetings, our December 21st meeting has been canceled, so our next regular open council meeting is on January 11th. The acting mayor's schedule for December and January is Councillor Schwarzenberger. Now would be public question period, and this is an opportunity for the audience to ask questions regarding matters discussed during the current meeting today. Is there anyone that would like to ask a question in attendance? I have someone, Michael Guthrie, that would like to have a question. Again, this is a question regarding matters discussed at the current meeting. Michael, you're on mute.
Yes, I was on mute. That thing always gets me. Hey, I just a kind of an afterthought here of what I've heard tonight, and the very few times that I've attended these meetings, I keep hearing the same thing, which is ways for town council and the town in general to spend money. Things like the very low DCCs, that if they weren't, for instance, with the DCCs, if they weren't able to meet the provincial best practices on these parks, who's going to pick up the tab? It's going to be the taxpayer. Emergency shelter, aquatic center, sewage user rate, new town hall complex, the RCMP thing that we went round and round about 2 years ago. They're all, you know, either on the verge or in the process of implying more taxes towards the particularly old folks of this community. I happen to be an older folk, but I'm not speaking on my own behalf. I'm a bit concerned that all we're talking about is how to spend money and maybe not how to generate it without emptying the pocketbooks of the not so fortunate folks who live in this community that you know, are living on fixed incomes and or just don't have any money whatsoever. On one hand, we don't have any living wage jobs in this town, but yet we're continuing to burden this community with higher taxes. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is here that when it comes to things like DCCs that would relieve the burden on the taxpayer, I would certainly encourage everybody on council to think about you know, getting it more in line with the other surrounding communities. I just don't agree. My wife she's been in real estate for 30 years, and her and I were discussing this tonight, and you can compare us to other communities. You should be.
Michael,
Yeah.
do you have a question?
Nope, that's it. Comment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for that comment, and I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved, second. Thank you. I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Motion is carried. We are adjourned. Thank you, council.
Bye, everyone.
You.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.